Have you ever wondered how medieval peasants didn't freeze to death during those endless bitter winters, the kind where the wind slips under your clothes like it's looking for a place to sleep, and the moon hangs in the sky like a cold, indifferent coin? If you think they survived thanks to radiant floor heating or triple-layer electric blankets, oh come on, this was the Middle Ages, and back then the only choice between warmth and cold was life or death. They didn't just endure the cold, they outsmarted it. With no gadgets, no insulation materials, and certainly no modern building codes, they used what they had: earth and a sharp understanding of how to turn it into a silent shield against the cold. And if you're currently wrapped in a Korean microfiber comforter sipping hot cocoa, while your space heater hums in the corner thinking, there's no way they made it through that kind of winter, think again. Instead of building on the ground, they dug into it. Just 2 or 3 feet down. Not much by our standards, but to them it was the line between another night alive or waking up with frostbite in places you didn't know could freeze. Archaeologists say these half-buried homes average 10 degrees warmer than fully above-ground structures. 10 degrees might sound small to you, but in a medieval winter, 10 degrees is a lifeline. It's the breath you can still see, the hand you can still move. And don't even get me started on how obsessed they were with conserving heat. You think your mum was strict about closing the front door? They built windows the size of mouse holes, ceilings so low you'd knock yourself out just trying to stretch. But no one complained because low ceilings mean trapped warmth, and trapped warmth meant you made it through the night. Now let's talk walls. Not drywall, not brick, not even wood. Try Wattle and Daub, which sounds like an indie folk band, but was really a messy masterpiece woven branches smeared with clay straw, and yes, human and animal manure. And before you wrinkle your nose, consider this. Those walls insulated better than many basic fiberglass modern ones. Your walls might smell better, sure, but could they save your life during a snowstorm? Then there was the roof, angled just right so snow would slide off, but not steep enough to lose your thatch in a gust. Beds were shoved into corners where the wind couldn't find them. Even the chicken coop had better windproofing than some tiny houses on Instagram today. Everything in that one-room home had a purpose, not for comfort, not for style, for survival. And at the centre, always the centre, was the hearth. Not some decorative fireplace with fake flames and Bluetooth speakers. This was the living, breathing core of the home, a place that cooked meals, dried socks, warmed fingers, and carried rumours like, "Did you hear old Henry's cow ran off with Margaret's?" Excavations show these hearths could keep rooms at 10 to 15 degrees, even while snow piled high outside. That may sound chilly now, but back then it was practically Cancun. If you've ever heard of feng shui, this was the medieval version, not for harmony or fortune, but for not dying. They didn't place furniture to align with cosmic energy. They placed it so no one would wake up with icicles on their eyelashes. And if you listen closely now, you might hear the wind hissing through a narrow crack in the wall, the soft pop of firewood in the hearth, the gentle rustle of blankets shared between 5 people, huddled like spoons in a drawer. A medieval winter night. Dark, deep, silent, but not hopeless, because the fire still burned and the people still lived. Step back with me to the year 1341. The wind is thin and sharp like a blade drawn across a sleeping field. The trees creak like old bones. The sky's a slab of pewter, heavy and low, and somewhere in a frostbitten English village we're standing before a house that's not just a shelter. It's a weapon against winter. This is the home of old Wulfric, a peasant by birth, but a quiet master of design by necessity. From the outside it looks simple: thatched roof, dirt walls, low door. But what you're about to see might make your modern apartment feel like a poorly thought-out greenhouse. The first thing Wulfric's house does, it faces the sun. No accident. Archaeological evidence shows that medieval builders often aligned their homes to maximise winter sunlight, angling windows and doors to catch every possible sliver of warmth during the short, bleak days. You think that's a new idea? Even modern architects sometimes forget to do that. Step inside and it's dark but not dead. There's a faint haze clinging to the ceiling smoke. Yes, there's no chimney, not really. The smoke from the hearth rises and lingers under the thatch. Not exactly good for your lungs, but it does something incredible. It creates a kind of insulating buffer, slowing down heat loss through the roof. And that's smoke. It preserves the thatch, kills off insects, repels mould, keeps the roof from rotting through 2 brutal winters instead of 1. That roof, by the way, is steep, carefully angled, steep enough that snow doesn't pile on and collapse it, but not so steep that the thatch slides right off. that balance. It's pure ancestral engineering carved from generations of trial, error and survival. And here's the real genius: the house changes with the seasons. In autumn, Wulfric redaubs the walls, patching up cracks with fresh clay and straw. He layers more thatch on the roof. He even hangs old blankets or animal hides on the wall's medieval insulation. We'd call them tapestries, he calls them lifesavers. And no, the interior doesn't have zones or smart thermostats. It's a single room, and yet somehow it holds its warmth far better than you'd expect. Thick, breathable wattle and daub walls regulate humidity and prevent mould. Thatched roofs, if you take care of them, outlast even some modern roofing under stress. You think your HVAC is advanced. Some of these medieval systems were more adaptive than what we build today. But don't romanticize it too much. Living here means living with smoke stinging your eyes, repairs after every storm, and the constant fear that one stray ember could eat the whole house. There's no fire department, no insurance. Still, there are no heating bills, no arguing with your smart thermostat at 2 a.m, no fake fireplace in the living room just for ambiance. Instead, you have rhythm, the rhythm of survival. You wake when the light returns. You plan your day around the sun's peak 10 a.m. to 2 p.m, when warmth reaches its daily high. Some villages even fined people for skipping the sun hours of labour. Forget your school's tardy policy. In 1267, one English village punished slackers with mandatory firewood donations. Because in winter, firewood was currency. Firewood was life. So, would you sleep here for one night? No foam mattress, no air purifier. Just the dim light of a coal fire, smoke-tinged rafters above your head, and the wind outside, clawing at the earth walls like something half human, half hunger. And yet, you're warm, you're safe, because the roof holds. It's sometime around midnight in Wulfric's village. The hearth is fading. The only light inside the house comes from a glowing clump of coals curled into itself in the ash, like a stubborn spirit refusing to die out. The rest of the family is fast asleep, or at least what passes for sleep when 3 generations are snoring in chorus across a single room. But Wulfric, he's awake. Tonight is his family's turn to guard the communal fire, and if he misses it, there'll be no fine, no shouting. But he'll have to wake before dawn for the next 7 days and haul water for the village oven in freezing dark long before the sun rolls in. And worse than that, he'll have to endure that particular look from old Hedda at the next village gathering. You know the one. The kind of look that chills your spine better than the wind ever could. Not worth it, he mutters, tugging his patched wool cloak tighter. I'd rather face the cold than her commentary. You think tending the fire is a trivial job? No. In a medieval winter, fire isn't warmth, it's life. And in this village, each family is assigned one night recorded formally in the manor rolls right alongside tax dues and plough obligations. Outside, the wind howls not like a storm but like a child lost in the dark. Wulfric steps into the courtyard and presses a long iron poker into the belly of the communal oven. The heat pulses back through his fingers, not strong but steady, like a hand placed gently over yours. Did you know a village of 80 people could raise the temperature inside each home by 3 degrees just by harnessing the radiant heat from the bread ovens? One tool, 2 outcomes: food and survival. He glances toward Hedda's cottage. She's a widow, frail, bones thin as bird legs. If Wulfric slacked off, her house might freeze into a tomb before morning. It's not about the punishment, he mutters. It's about the whole village. And then you hear it, don't you? A cold horn cries out from the village watchtower, 3 short blasts. The signal. Temperatures have dropped into danger range. No panic, no shouting, but everyone who knows, knows. This isn't a joke. The frost watchers have been observing, measuring, not with thermometers, with ceramic bowls of water placed in open air. When the ice forms quickly, it's time. Wulfric hurries back through the dark. He knocks lightly on doors still glowing with firelight. Come in. The freeze has started. You think he's off duty now? Not quite. The other day, someone caught him helping his daughter cut kindling out back after the horn had sounded. And the village, it has a system for that. Cold points. Think of them as a survival scoreboard. Follow the rules. You stay in the clear, break curfew, lose points. Lose too many, and the village assigns you community service. So now, Wulfric has been sentenced to sweep the church courtyard at sunrise for 3 days straight. Could be worse, he grumbles. Could be my wife finding out I left the axe outside again. But here's the funny thing, he's not angry, not bitter, because deep down he knows this is how a village survives. You think it's harsh, or maybe it's harmony disguised as discipline. A quiet pact made between everyone breathing the same cold air, trusting each other to keep the fire going. Now tell me this. Would you trade one night of your life to sit awake in the dark, not from stress or emails, but because you were chosen to keep 80 people alive? To sit beside the coals, your hands numb, your back aching, and your heart warm? Because this fire, it isn't just yours, it belongs to every soul sleeping right now because of you. And if you're still awake, we can move on to the village's bread hour or lie down nestled between Wulfric and his wife in what they called the second sleep, where dreams and snow melt into one another, and morning is just a faraway rumour. You choose. I'll stay up a little longer. You think meetings are a modern thing, a necessary evil cooked up by bored middle managers with too much time and not enough espresso. Try rewinding the clock to a winter evening in the year 1326. The sun's just dipped below the hillside, not dramatically, just vanished. It's the kind of dusk where the sky turns the colour of cold steel, and the wind sneaks up your sleeves like it knows where your skin is weakest. And just when the cold starts to tighten its grip on every joint and breath and knuckle, the villagers begin to gather. Not for worship, not for voting, but for what we might call strategic congregation. They drift toward the largest house in the village, often the blacksmith's, or the brewer's, or whoever had the space, and didn't mind being stepped on. No one sends invites. No one takes minutes. They come, press close, share, body heat trade stories, swap news, and somewhere between passing a jug of mead and laughing about someone's escaped goat important village matters get discussed. It's not a meeting, it's not a ritual, it's just how warmth happened, both literal and otherwise. Because when 20 people squeeze into one room, the temperature goes up. Not metaphorically, literally. 5 degrees Celsius. Enough to make knees stop aching and fingers stop twitching. Some villagers even planned these cosy councils during the coldest weeks of the year when every calorie saved was a step away from pneumonia. You think it's just clever? It's genius. It's thermal survival via gossip. And bedtime that wasn't personal either. It was part of the communal temperature strategy. See, the last family to sleep each night had one final job. They had to make rounds, check the fires in nearby homes, and ensure no glowing embers were left burning where they shouldn't. Why? Because all it took was one overlooked coal, one badly banked hearth, and someone's roof, someone's barn, someone's grandmother gone by dawn. And this wasn't a do-it-if-you-feel-like-it kind of chore. It was scheduled, rotated, recorded, and if you were caught nodding off during your firewatch shift, no yelling. No shame circle. You just had to donate a chunk of your winter fuel stash to the communal pile, which frankly hurt more, because every log burned after that felt like a reminder I fell asleep. Someone else stayed warm for me. A record from 1289 mentions a man who dozed off mid-round and was fined half his entire season's firewood. He didn't freeze to death, but I bet he shivered a little more for the rest of the winter. You think that's the end of it? Not even close. These people didn't just know how to stay warm, they knew how to feed themselves like artists of preservation. If you ever find yourself on a survival reality show stuck between a finance bro and a 13th century peasant, just bow out. The peasant wins. They'll outlast all of you and roast a turnip over a rock while humming a tune about cloud patterns. Instead of fridges, they had what I lovingly call the ground that knows. They dug storage pits, deep-layered, vented, packed with straw and somehow holding at a stable 39 Fordefase year-round. No electricity, no humming motor, just earth logic and patience. Archaeologists have found thousands of these across Britain. One small village in Yorkshire had over 200 for just 50 households. That's an average of 4 cold chambers per home. Let that sink in. They had personal root cellar privilege before we even knew what fridge shelves were. And you know what's brilliant? They used vegetables as temperature sensors. Seriously, they'd place carrots or turnips in key zones of the storage pit. If the carrots got soft or slick, too cold, needs more insulation. If they sprouted too warm, vent it better. They didn't have digital monitors. They had root vegetables whispering weather reports. One 13th century manual even ranked vegetables by emotional resilience to cold kale being the stubborn old guard and poor tomatoes, delicate snowflakes of the garden. It's absurd, it's amazing. And honestly, it's deeply, profoundly human, because in that world, everything spoke if you were quiet enough to listen. You know that pile of hay most people think is just for the animals, to scatter in stables or stuff under goats. Well, leave it to medieval peasants to look at what everyone else ignores and turn it into infrastructure. Because to them, hay wasn't just for chewing or sleeping. Hay was insulation. Hay was a jacket. Hay was a soft, whispering wall between survival and frostbite. They didn't just toss it in the corners. They wrapped entire homes in it, tucked it into walls, stuffed it behind rafters, and most impressively they layered it around food storage areas like wrapping the year's harvest in a winter coat made of dry grass and silent calculations. And it wasn't random, it was structured, measured, intentional. Archaeologists have found that each layer of hay could buffer temperature shifts by around 2 degrees. 3 layers, that's a 6-degree swing, enough to keep a turnip firm instead of mushy, enough to convince a carrot it was still autumn. Now modern people hear that and go, but how did they even know? Well, they didn't have sensors, but they had vegetables. Carrots were the data. Root vegetables became biological thermometers. If a carrot went soft, too cold, add more hay. If it sprouted, too warm, open a vent. If it turned to slime, too late, eat fast. It was primitive climate control using nothing but observation patience and a remarkable lack of ego. And speaking of cold, when the snow came and the sky turned glassy and cruel, modern people ran inside. Medieval peasants, they grabbed buckets and ran out to collect snow. Why to pack it carefully around food pits, layer by layer, building what we now know were basically natural refrigeration bunkers. Studies of surviving medieval food stores show that with this technique, they could keep temperatures between 1.6 and 3.3 dig for weeks, even after the snow had melted. In one village in northern England, the snow pits were so well built they could preserve meat, butter, even vegetables into May. Let that sink in. Snow as insulation, not a threat, not an obstacle, a tool, a strategy, a partner. And the layout of those pits not accidental. They reveal an intuitive understanding of thermal mass principles centuries before anyone named them. But the true champion, the heavyweight master of medieval food preservation, was the underground chamber. These weren't just holes in the ground. They were engineering statements with multiple compartments, each designed for a different kind of food. Some had drainage systems so smart they'd make a plumber blink ventilation paths that mimicked natural airflow, and my personal favourite, primitive humidity control, achieved by placing water jars strategically inside the chamber. Archaeological soil samples from these vaults show they maintained humidity between 85 and 95%, an ideal range to keep produce alive, crisp and frost-free for months. And here's the wildest part. In the 1960s, while excavating one of these chambers, researchers discovered seeds sealed in time. Some were still viable. They planted them. And yes, they grew. Medieval turnips, sprouting again after 700 years of silence. Imagine that. A root born before the Black Death, sleeping through wars, reforms, famines and refrigerators, and then finally waking up in the fluorescent glow of a university cafeteria. A bite of history, a taste of patience, a living, breathing line between what we've forgotten and what they quietly knew. And just when you think medieval peasants couldn't get any more tactical, they had a seasonal food rotation system. Not the kind where you shove leftovers to the back of the fridge and hope for the best. This was an actual strategic redistribution of food storage based on subtle shifts in temperature and moisture. They'd physically move vegetables from one chamber to another depending on the weather, the moon, the behaviour of last week's carrots. Turnips went east. Parsnips stayed in the dark pit. Cabbage, poor thing, was always on the brink of exile. A manor record from 1292 lays out detailed instructions for these rotations, and yes, it reads like a pressure cooker episode of Iron Chef Root Cellar Edition. Except here, if you mess up your storage plan, you don't get eliminated. You just don't eat in February. There were even penalties for ignoring the rotation schedule. Because in a community where food was survival, disorganization wasn't just sloppy, it was dangerous. But the discovery that made me pause, the one that still lingers in my head like the last coals of a fire, was something they called the taster's turn. Every few days, someone in the village had to taste a small sample of the stored food, just enough to check whether it had started to spoil. It sounds simple. It wasn't. Because if the food was going bad, you didn't learn from sight or smell. You learned by swallowing. If you were fine, great. If you weren't, let's just say your contribution to the community came with digestive consequences. And of course, the job rotated. One week it was you, the next your neighbour. Like jury duty, except the jury might end up in the latrine. One record describes a man who tried to skip his turn by claiming quite dramatically that he had already died from spoiled turnip. Nice try, he still got the ladle. And sure, it's funny in hindsight, but this weird little ritual, it saved villages. It prevented mass food poisoning. It was medieval food safety community sourced, risk distributed and tracked on parchment. They took it seriously. They wrote everything down. What worked, what didn't. What temperature caused what reaction in which root vegetable under which moon phase. We've uncovered 13th century food storage manuals that read like early scientific journals, notes on airflow, condensation, insulation, spoilage, timeframes. They didn't have thermometers, but they had experience and they listened to what carrots were trying to tell them. And once all of that was handled, the rotating, the testing, The hay-insulated chambers of edible suspense came the hardest part of all, actually turning that sad-looking produce into food. You think meal prep is hard? Try making a 5,000-calorie dinner with nothing but dried legumes, pickled onions, and anxiety. Because yes, historical medical records from the 14th century show that doctors recommended 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day during the worst of winter. More than modern Olympic swimmers consume. But here's the thing. They had to get that energy from food that hadn't rotted, frozen, fermented, or disappeared. There was no running to the market, no arugula, no oranges, no just Postmate it. My grocery store can't keep cilantro fresh for 4 days. These people kept turnips alive for 4 months. And through it all they cooked. They measured. They tasted, rotated, endured, and sometimes joked about dying from a bad radish. But they fed themselves. They fed their children. And they passed on these techniques like gospel. We can step into Wulfric's kitchen next, see what his wife's doing with the marrow bone and barley mash. Or we can knock on the door of this week's taster, ask if he's still standing, or sitting, or breathing. If you've ever groaned under 3 layers of memory foam bundled in fleece pyjamas, hugging a hot water bottle like a life raft and still whispered, "It's freezing tonight," then welcome to a winter night in Wulfric's house where everything was a strategy, everyone was a heat source, and even the bed had battle plans. There's only one room, one hearth, one door, and one bed, except bed is generous. It's more like a raised platform angled ever so slightly inward like a giant wooden bowl, stuffed with compressed straw wool blankets of questionable origin, and a final layer of fabric that might have once been someone's wedding dress. And on it 6 people Wulfric, his wife, and their 4 children arranged with surgical precision, not splayed, not sprawled. They sleep-curled, leaned back at a gentle slope, not lying flat, but tilted, almost seated, as if dozing in the lap of a very stoic chair. Limbs folded in breath, soft bodies lined up like spoons in a drawer. That's the top floor. Underneath, 2 goats, 1 sleepy calf, and a loose congregation of chickens who cluck in their dreams and occasionally lay a midnight egg. It's not that they're out of room. It's because animals emit heat. And in this ecosystem of timber and straw, the goat warms the boy who warms the mother who warms the toddler, and so on a living heating grid built from fur and forgiveness. This, my friend, is biothermal radiant floor heating medieval edition. And it worked. Modern reconstructions show that just raising the sleeping platform 18 inches off the ground creates a temperature buffer of up to 5 degrees, elevating you out of the cold air that hugs the floor, while still letting you soak up warmth from the barnyard beneath. You think they rolled out of bed at night. Unlikely. The sleeping surface was designed with a shallow dip toward the centre, just deep enough to cradle a family in place even if someone had a dream about falling into a well. And the sleeping choreography, that was its own kind of magic. Grandparents and babies, the heat-sensitive elite, always took the middle. Parents and teens who doubled as midnight fire checkers or goat-calming specialists slept on the edges. When someone stirred to stoke the hearth, check the embers, or answer nature's call, they'd quietly rotate places on their return, ensuring heat was always redistributed, never wasted. Imagine a dance performed in total silence with closed eyes and nightly ballet where no one watched but everyone moved. And if a family left too much space between them, there were inspectors. Historical records from 1289 mention officials whose sole job was to measure sleeping efficiency, ensuring families weren't being reckless with body heat. One family caught spooning inefficiently was fined a full week's worth of firewood. No jokes. They even used measuring sticks. Sleep was logistics. Heat was economy. Now as for the bed itself, a masterpiece in camouflage, looked like a pile of old blankets. It was actually a 3-layer insulation device. Straw on bottom changed with the seasons. Wool in the middle if you could afford it. And whatever you had on top, burlap, linen, fur, prayers. But the brilliance. The entire bed was angled at exactly 15 degrees. Modern airflow simulations confirm that precise slope encourages warm air to circulate while minimizing heat loss, like a low-tech convection oven designed by cold-tired geniuses. And what they wore to bed, not just clothes, weapons against frost. Each person wore up to 5 layers of wool hand-woven with strategic density softest against the skin thickest on the outside, forming air pockets that trapped heat better than most modern synthetics. And between the layers moss, dry moss, collected, sorted, selected, 12 different kinds based on absorbency, fluffiness, and natural antibacterial properties. They even fought over moss zones. 2 villages once went to court over access to the best hill for winter moss. Rags were stuffed with straw. Coats were rubbed down with sheep tallow and pine resin, creating a waterproof sealant so effective that recreated versions today hold off heavy rain for 4 straight hours. Even their undergarments, a blend of wool and nettle fibre, absorbed sweat almost as efficiently as modern tech wear. They were itchy. They were awful. They kept you alive. One medieval writer called it the unbearable itch of winter, still better than death. And that funny-looking hood they wore, it wasn't a fashion disaster. It was a wind-calibrated modular heat shield with adjustable flaps that could reduce wind chill on the face by 60%. Put it all together, the angled bed, the livestock heating system, the sleep choreography, the moss-stuffed armour, the engineered wool layers, and what you have is a house that doesn't just keep warm, it conspires with the cold. So next time you're wrapped in microfiber and muttering about your smart thermostat not syncing with your phone, imagine yourself curled up beside Wulfric, blanketed in 5 layers, breathing in slow harmony with your snoring goat, and sleeping in a spoon line so optimised it could be mistaken for a military formation. Because in this world, warmth wasn't just about comfort. It was about coordination and survival. You know those pointy medieval shoes that look like someone tried to cosplay as a jester on stilts? Turns out they weren't just a quirky fashion choice, they were physics. Medieval thermal engineering by foot. The narrower the contact with the frozen ground, the less heat your body loses through your soles. And modern thermal imaging proves it those weird little elf shoes cut heat loss by up to 25% compared to broader-soled medieval footwear. So no, Uncle Wulfric wasn't trying to make a statement. He was trying to keep his toes attached. And when the shoes came off, the rest of the wardrobe took over. Winter clothes weren't left hanging limp in some dusty corner. They were tucked, packed, stored like heirlooms in cedar chests lined with bundles of aromatic herbs, each one hand-picked not just for scent, but for natural antimicrobial power. Modern scientists studying preserved textile trunks found traces of dozens of herbs, some of which we now know carry natural antibacterial and insect-repellent compounds. In short, they were fighting bacteria before they even knew what bacteria was. They even rotated their wardrobes on a seasonal schedule based not just on the calendar, but on signs from nature like when raspberries shriveled or when the geese began to fly south. Meteorologists today have cross-checked these indicators and found their accuracy rates at 85%. No apps, just instincts passed down like folklore. But the best defense against the cold wasn't the clothes, it was the crowd. Every winter, Wulfric's village hosted wool-spinning gatherings not just to mend socks and stitch sleeves, but to generate body heat by sheer proximity. 20 to 30 people in a room, fingers moving wool, flying laughter, crackling like kindling, and the temperature in that room up by 6 degrees Celsius without burning a single log. One record notes a village saving 3 weeks' worth of firewood just by holding group sowing bees during the coldest part of the year. And when even the thickest wool and rattiest moss couldn't hold back the freeze, the villagers pulled out their final weapon, livestock. Not outside, inside, and not randomly scattered, strategically deployed like a living snorting central heating system. Cows went near the bed, sheep around the walls, pigs closer to the food stores, chickens in every cranny they could squeeze into. A record from 1288 literally ranked animals by heat output: 1 cow, 4 sheep, and 16 chickens. Funny, yes, but also remarkably accurate. Modern thermal studies confirm that those calculations match today's models within a 5% margin of error. And they didn't just provide heat. They created what scientists now call a primitive greenhouse effect, their breath and body heat warming and moistening the air inside the house, maintaining a stable 60% humidity ideal for preventing wood rot respiratory issues and the kind of bone-deep dryness that makes you feel like your soul is flaking off. Let's be clear, your humidifier can't do that. Not unless it clucks and lays eggs on the floor. And it didn't stop there. The floors themselves were layered with straw and ash designed to absorb animal waste and generate heat through decomposition. Yes, they weaponized manure. The microbial breakdown in those straw-packed floors raised the room temperature by another 1-2 degrees and produced natural antiseptics that helped fight disease. It was gross. It was genius. Even feeding the animals was optimized. Rotating food hatches, exterior loading mechanisms, they invented primitive pet doors and lazy Susans just to keep from opening the main door and letting the warmth escape. And the cherry on top, they had zoning regulations. Some villages only allowed a specific number and type of animals indoors based on house size and family count, all to hit a heat per body ratio they'd quietly mastered centuries before. HVAC was a twinkle in an engineer's eye. One document from 1295 even states a family of 5 shall not attempt winter without at least 2 cow equivalent heat. Modern thermodynamic simulations agree. These estimates were within 10% of modern science's own measurements. The best households were able to maintain safe winter temps with just 60% of the livestock. Most others needed efficiency that would make a sustainability consultant weep with joy. And all this indoor animal magic came with rules. The villages had winter coordinators. They mapped airflow. They calculated placement. They assigned cold wardens by midsummer who started prepping like generals before a siege. Communal firewood splitting check. Work rotation based on age tool ownership and strength check. Scoring systems for who contributed the most absolutely. One village tracked contribution scores by carving them onto a communal tally stick. Slacking off didn't just mean colder nights, it meant you'd sleep next to the drafty corner of the town hall during group events. And that hall, it wasn't just a building, it was a passive heating marvel. Some had double doors that acted as airlocks, what modern engineers now call a thermal vestibule. They'd invented it 600 years early. They monitored frost by placing clay jars of water at different heights, checking which froze first, a system that scientists today confirm was accurate with intersuperability. And when all else failed, they held community heat shares. Whole families would rotate through the village hall in scheduled shifts, human warmth redistributed like wealth. Some churches even had special warming rooms, calefactories designed for infants and the elderly. No incense, just insulation. They knew what they were doing. And they knew deeply that no one survives the cold alone. So the next time you sip a latte under a heated blanket while your smart thermostat quietly argues with your app, remember the people who layered moss into their sleeves, who cuddled cows with calculated love, who carried fire in their chests and neighbours on their backs. They didn't just survive winter, they survived for us. And somewhere between the straw floors and the spoons in a bed, they passed down something even warmer than heat. Us.